had the distinct pleasure to work with on a number of occasions over the last few years, somebody that I admire greatly. And she said, "Hey, with what you guys are doing, I got a couple people you need to meet, and you were one of the names on that list, man." And so I'm honored and I'm excited to dive into you and dive into your story.
Same here. I think 80% of the people I know are because of Lenore,
I believe that. Yeah, I believe that. She's that kind of person, man,
a
for sure.
connector. Yes.
Yes, she is. She very much is. So cool. Do you mind if I give you just a quick context just to make sure you're good? And if there's any questions on your side, and then we'll rock and roll and start talking about you. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah, good.
So we have got the distinct pleasure of being able to do this every single week. We get to do it with our men. We get to do it with our women. We get to do it with our young men. We've got young ladies programs on the way, but we've got young men and men from quite literally all over the world with us right now, live. We're going to dive in and learn about you, learn about your story, your journey, what you're doing now, what you're creating. And you and I'll talk for 20, 30 minutes, and then we'll let some of the young men and the men jump in and just kind of Q&A, easy, just dive into your work. And this goes out to a podcast. We've been very lucky that the podcast is well received too and goes out to a lot of folks. But everybody that's here is on a journey of education. And I always say all education is self-education. Ultimately that's where it is. So we've got guys here that are, young men that are pursuing their own businesses to, college. Some of them are home educated. Some of them are in traditional schools, some are in Apogee schools. We've got men that are from all walks of life doing all kinds of things, husbands, fathers, Apogee school owners. We've got the whole mix, but everybody's here pursuing living a code, being a good human, getting sovereignty and freedom back to being a thing that's more normal than not. So it's a good group of humans, man. So there's the
Sounds like
context. Any questions on that before we get to dive into you?
no, sounds great.
Beautiful. I love to dive into so I was telling them before we jumped on the work you are doing. In the short time that I've gotten to dive in, it's you're in one of my favorite fields on the planet. Our month one for our men, we worked with Jordan Peterson a little bit. We worked with Dr. Andrew Shaw. We worked a little bit with Todd Herman, sports psychology, and to really build out this internal narrative of how do I figure out who the heck I am. I love the work that you're doing. But before we even get there, I want to talk about how you got into it in the first place. Can we go back to Dr. C as a young man? We got some 13, 14-year-olds on here. Who were you at that age?
Yeah. Well, so my story starts really when I was two, when my mom and I showed up at JFK Airport from Columbia, which is where I was born, and my dad had been here for a year trying to get things going, and we were immigrants suddenly in a country where we didn't speak the language. My first language is Spanish, obviously hers was, and we were poor and trying to figure out how to, as you know, with any immigrant family, how to create roots in a new place. Um, and it was difficult, and I didn't realize at the time how helpful that would be to me later, the fact that my childhood was more difficult than most. And one of the ways that it helped me was that I was super independent as a kid. We didn't have money for babysitters or anything, and so I was on my own a lot, which at the time I thought, well, this isn't as good as other people have it, but now is the best thing that could have happened to me. It's the generation X story of it's 9 a.m. I'll see you for dinner. Go figure out what you're going to do.
Mm.
And then I went to high school in Manhattan, pretty prestigious high school that I was able to get in with a test that they give to all the kids here in New York City. I did okay. I wasn't a star student, but there were enough smart people around me that I started to value education, and I started to see maybe there's this path for me if I step up my game a little bit where I could be successful. And then every step, every degree I get, I work harder, I get more education. And now I'm largely doing research on independence. And can it be used as an actual psychological treatment for anxious kids? So instead of coming to my office and sitting there after school, which is the last thing any kid wants to do, especially an anxious kid, can we actually turn this into asking them, what do you want to do independently that you're not doing now? And they get excited about that, as opposed to the type of therapy that most kids get, which is boring or uncomfortable. And then we track what they do every week. They try to do one independence activity per day. And it can be something like riding the subway by yourself, which is where Lenore started with all of this.
That's
But
right.
it can be starting a small business at school. It can be painting your own room. It can be starting a fire in your backyard. It can be whittling with a stick. We actually encourage activities that are somewhat dangerous, because that's how kids get mastery over dangers, with lots of practice with danger. And so it might sound like a strange thing for a child psychologist to be assigning homework to kids that is dangerous, but actually, I'll show you my favorite book these days. It's 50 Dangerous Things That Your
Oh, I gotta
Kid
get
Should Be Doing. So I draw a lot from here. And we started to test whether being independent actually reduces anxiety, and it seems to do that. And it seems to do that in less time, fewer sessions, and faster than medication or traditional psychotherapy.
Oh my goodness, man. I love this so much. Okay, I have a million questions on this in particular too. How did you come to a place where this was the avenue that you wanted to study? I, like you, I think I look a lot older. We may be the same age. Can I ask you how old you are? I know I'm not supposed to ask.
52.
Oh, I don't like, I look older and you're older than I am, but that's, so we're not off to a good start on that. But no, I'm just kidding. But that Gen X story, right? That Gen X, it's not just a story, it's not just a narrative. There is a lot of truth to that. We
Yeah.
all remember, and so many of the men that are on this call live with us too, and I know a lot of our audience is in that age range, and we remember exactly what you said. The proverbial, hey, get out of here. We'll see you when the like the street lights come on. That was real. You're 4 or 5 walking to school and walking home by yourself. That was real. The jumping on the bikes and you're traveling the neighborhood or you're traveling the city. That was real. And we are so far the other way on this pendulum swing right now. So, was it your own childhood experience that pushed you to be interested in that, or were you seeing something else that made you go, this may be an avenue worth exploration? What really put you in that
It's
mind?
certainly that, but it's also this like annoyance I feel constantly with my field at fragilizing everybody, and treating humans, and particularly children, like if we don't say things a certain way or do this or say that, they'll fall apart. And I get a physically uncomfortable sensation. I do not like that. And a lot of therapy that we do ends up being a version of that. And like parents call me all the time, and for help with their kids, and they will say like, I said that they should do something this way, did I say it right? And like the anxiety is just palpable, and almost always it's a completely reasonable thing to say. Kids, we don't have to say things a certain way or do things a certain way. Evolution has made kids quite flexible and powerful and good problem solvers, and it is hard to mess kids up. And I just like hate this whole approach. And so it's with a lot of things, it's a reaction to my own annoyance. I'm almost like the Larry David of psychology. Things that annoy me actually lead to innovation, I think.
I love that. I talk about why we're building schools that we're building, right? Annoyed at the state of of education currently in a lot of ways. So I love that so much, man. You mentioned the parents that call and having those conversations. Ooh, did I say that the right way? Did I use the right words? Is there a phrase, right? Looking for that checklist of 1 through 10 to perfection, right? Which you and I both know doesn't exist. That anxiety We talk about the anxious generation. I know I shouldn't say I know. I'm pretty sure you know John Hay as
Yeah,
well.
well,
You guys worked together, and so John, I know his work. I don't know John. I know Peter Gray. I know obviously Lenore. Um, that anxiety that we're seeing in our youth now is how much in your experience is that partially predicated upon a very anxious generation of parents?
yes, absolutely. We see sort of this transfer of anxiety. I tweeted this morning something about climate anxiety and how silly that's its own category of thing. And the only thing interesting about climate anxiety is the clear transfer of anxiety from a parent to a child.
Mm,
Mm. And so we absolutely not only are parents more anxious than they've ever been, they are less satisfied with how well they think they're doing. And at the same time, they're spending more time and more money with kids than ever before.
mm,
So they are throwing everything at this and feeling worse over time. This is an unsustainable, uh, state of being. We just like parents cannot do more than they're doing. And in fact, I think a lot of the problems that we see today are because of how much parents are doing. And so one way to think about my work is getting parents out of the hair of kids and letting kids develop naturally, which is the best way. So a lot of what I do is leave your kid alone, and then we see better outcomes, and then parents are happier. And I want them to be more selfish with their time. They think good parenting is more and more and more. And I want to change this narrative where good parenting is actually less.
So, gosh, I see why Lenore is like, you guys, you're gonna. She literally told me you're gonna absolutely love this guy. She goes, "Do you know Peter Gray?" I said, "I know Peter a little. I know his work." She goes, "Okay, well, let me connect you guys. But do you know Dr. C?" And I said, "No, I don't know him." She goes, "I think you're gonna love him even more than you love Peter's stuff." Because we think very much the same way. I believe in a lot of this. So this less is more mentality. And again, man, state of New York is spending $48,000 per pupil right now, and the education is just getting worse. There's so many different ways we can pull that in your practice. Then you're talking to these young people. You're going, hey, let's give you an opportunity to be independent while you are doing these things, potentially some dangerous things. And then you know that parents are the ones that are helping to pass anxiety along too. So, how much time do you have to allocate to the young person that you are helping, and then also to the parent? How much are
Yeah.
you doing therapy there too?
Yeah, I gotta get a lot of buy-in from parents
Yeah.
because they're terrified of allowing more independence and therefore more short-term risk. And it is true. The risk goes up in the short term. What I argue is that it goes down in the long term because kids get better at handling risk.
Mm-hmm.
So Lenore actually is the answer here because the first session I spend with only parents, and it's only about getting buy-in about how are things going right now in your family for your kid with the level of oversight that you have. And they will acknowledge, not well, that's why I'm here to see you.
Right.
And so then I say, well, what if there was a way, this Goldilocks scenario, for you to do less and actually get better outcomes? And then they're intrigued. I don't tell them how yet.
Right.
And then I show this video, which I encourage everybody watch. It's on YouTube. It's called Off the Rails, and it's by this great filmmaker named John Popola, and it's Lenore's story. And it's about how she let her son take the subway from Bloomingdale's on 59th Street to their apartment on the Upper West Side. And all hell broke loose after that. She wrote
Mm.
a story about it. She was on every talk show. She was labeled America's worst mom. And then the worst part is they made an episode of what's that SVU series?
Oh, like a Law and Order
Law and
kind
Order
of.
SVU
All right.
about her story, but in the episode, as opposed to what actually happened, which is the kid
It's
took the subway and he got home and he felt amazing. He gets murdered
fine. Of course.
on the way and tortured to death. They show like the kid's dead body in the episode, and he has cigarette burns, and like how awful this was for Lenore and the story. Um,
Unbelievable.
yeah. So when parents watch that, part of the video is actually quite a patriotic part, which is like, what makes America America? It's that we take risks, is that we don't back away from difficulty. And most parents who watch this video actually tear up and start crying. And as a psychologist, you know that when you have emotion, you've got something there.
Mm.
And so I will ask them, like, tell me a little bit about what you're feeling. And the usual answer is, when I remember my own childhood, the best moments are independence moments, and I'm not letting my kid have the same thing. And so then they feel the cognitive dissonance of that. And I said, so tell me more. What's getting in the way? I'm afraid. So we start talking about that. We put it all on the table.
Mm.
And by the end of that session, almost every parent is willing
Mm.
to be uncomfortable, to take those short-term risks. And then the next session, we bring the kid in, and like I said, we say, what do you want to do independently? And they always have things they want to do, but if they don't, I have a list of 100 things that
Sure.
we can try. And we always get parents' permission. They never do anything without parents' consent, and then they start doing them, and then we see results really fast. And that nothing convinces parents like results.
Yes, sir. Correct. I love that. I didn't know that that video existed. I've spoken to John a couple of times over the years, and I
Yeah.
love a lot of his work. So that makes complete sense. I'm
It's
gonna.
like a 9-minute video. It's
Okay.
really,
Okay. Very cool. I'll put that video in our platform too, and I'll make sure we link it on this too. I love what you mentioned. That cognitive dissonance is a fascinating thing, and I've said this from an educational standpoint for a long time. And I think you're saying something that parallels this, where I talk about how I can logically walk parents through skill acquisition and acquiring a phenomenal education and really what that looks like. And I can walk them through how, our campuses, there's no such thing as a panacea, there's no such thing as perfection. But I can walk through where it makes a lot of sense, but there's this emotional attachment to the way school always was, the way they thought it was, and like they have a hard time, bridging the gap. So you're doing that same thing where you're going, look, man, feel the emotion of what that was like being independent, but fear is what's gotten in the way. Is that fear in your experience and in your research? Is that it's a media thing? It is a TV thing where Law and Order SVU is now spinning this, and it's like, hey, if your child goes outside, he or she's getting kidnapped, definitely going to be tortured. Like, is it coming from that, or is there anything really that the parents should be like, okay, well, yeah, I do need to kind of think about this. Like, how do you view that whole fear conversation for them?
yeah, it's in large part, I think, media driven.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think there are several pieces to this. It's also caused by affluence, actually. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you sort of like think about the last 200 years,
Mm-hmm.
um, people didn't care about microaggressions because there were macroaggressions,
Yes,
like,
sir.
right? So
Yes,
like
sir.
our brains are made to be threat detectors, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why our ancestors survived. And that machinery doesn't change just because we live in a safer time. It's still doing its job. And so if this is not a danger anymore, it's the bar is going to be wherever it is. And now the danger might just be the danger of feeling uncomfortable. And so our brains are always looking, what's making me uncomfortable? And so there is this very uh, big wall that we have to get over, which is this evolutionary machinery that as life gets easier, doesn't change. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the hardest part to get over. But it is also clear that we have entered uh, a new cultural moment where lots of unhelpful things are going on, including things like the media. But also, what I mentioned before is like, what do people think good parenting is? And somehow, more parenting is what good parenting is.
Yeah.
And I don't really know why that happened. There are some theories again about affluence causing that,
Yeah.
or the expertization of everything that we do, including parenting. We need to
Mm.
know the latest from the smartest guy. And the truth, if you look at how the sausage is made in my field, we actually don't know a lot of things. And
Hmm.
so we have lots of quote unquote experts. We might have seen Dr. Becky and other people like that.
Yeah.
And they all disagree with each other. So this idea that we know all the answers, I think is silly. And so being in there myself, I feel like I want to open the curtains to show people, show parents, you can trust yourself. You probably
Yeah.
know more than we do.
Yeah, that there's actually something to that if you're paying attention to the kids too. I love somebody used the term the other day, infobesity, because I said something about,
I
the
love
fact that we are, we're in this culture where it's like, okay, life isn't working out well, but what I need then is the next book, the next podcast, the next expert, the next where it's like, no, maybe just take action on some of the stuff that you see and you already kind of know, and then let's see how it pans out, and then you pay attention and trust yourself a little bit, and
yeah.
actually kind of go that way.
So
Um,
little of therapy or my field in general is information exchange. People
mm,
know generally
mm,
why things are not going well. It's
mm,
not about teaching them anything. It's about helping them get over the barriers that are stopping them. And the
mhm,
same is
mhm.
true with parenting. They know if you scream at your kid all day long, that's not good. They know if you have no rules and you let your kid do everything they want, that's not good. But they get stuck in the moment with something that gets in the way of doing that.
So good, man. Not necessarily about teaching them, it's about getting over the barriers that are stopping them. I think that's true for so much. Um, Man, this is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite episodes in a long time. And gentlemen, I want you guys start putting your hands up at any point that you want to put your hands up. I've got a few more that I'm going to selfishly ask prior to, but please get your hands up at any point, and I'll know how long the list is going to get. Um, do you see any differences in terms of the people that you're bringing in terms of ages? Or what is your thought around age as a as it goes into childhood development and all that? Is there kind of an age where you're seeing the anxiety really take off for kids? And is there an age where you go, hey, look, this independence really starts here, or is it just levels of independence at various ages? I know that's really kind of like three questions in
No,
one,
no, I
but
get
how are
it.
you factoring all of that in?
So when we look at when anxiety disorders typically show themselves, it tends to be middle school for many of them is the sweet spot. And so we have fashioned independence therapy to be around those years. So we've tested it from around age 9 to 13.
Okay.
That's also a time where still, with everything that's going on, parents do allow kids occasionally to walk to the pizza place or to do things. So there's some, we can work with most parents at that age. I get asked this question a lot. Are there independence therapy version for younger kids and for older kids?
Right.
I haven't developed a manual yet, but clearly there are.
Yep.
And I give this story a lot where I was at some get together with parents and little kids, and there was a 2-year-old who was trying to get her sweater off. And you know how we all like kind of get stuck sometimes in the turtleneck, and she was stuck and she was making like a little sound of distress. And I'm sitting there kind of watching, and only a child psychologist would think to that this might be
Sure.
interesting. And I see the dad dash across the room. Are you okay? And he pulls the sweater off. And again, not bad. It didn't harm her. But I'm thinking, like, what would have happened there if he just waited a little bit? I think she would have pulled it off. And would she have learned anything about herself? Maybe that she can tolerate a little distress and problem solve. So I see a million little opportunities for even very young kids. And then
Mm,
I work with men in their 20s who are having trouble with independence, and it's clearly not working for them. And so there are versions even for adults. I
yeah,
just haven't fully developed those treatments yet.
that's so cool. So what do you spend your work right now? How are you divvying up your time in terms of I'm going to work with patients here, I'm developing somewhat of a playbook here, I'm doing research here. Like how do you divvy up your time right now and
Yeah,
your focus?
ask my wife because she says that I need to do less. But
I believe
so
that.
so I'm a full-time tenured professor at Long Island University. I have students, I teach, I do research.
This is
Yep,
Long Island right here.
right. Uh,
Beautiful.
I run a I'm a co-owner of a fairly large private psychology practice on Long Island in Great Neck. Um, and then I give talks, I do podcasts, I write. So I'm someone who likes to do a million things. I get bored very easily.
Yes, sir.
So I gotta do less. I went scuba diving in the Galapagos with my son 2 weeks ago, and that was the longest vacation I've taken in 20 years.
Good for you.
I'm
I
trying.
understand. I understand. I think this
Heal
is,
thyself, right?
I understand. Gosh, I see more and more why Lenore is connecting us too. We had a live event out here with some of our men about a week ago, and when we got done, a bunch of the guys came over to the farm out here afterwards, and one of the guys said, "Man, hey, by the way, what do you do for fun?" I'm like, "You guys are fun. You guys are my fun. My work is my like. I enjoy this."
Yeah,
So it's the same, man. We haven't done the vacation thing in a long time, but I also kind of take Seth Godin's advice of building a life I don't necessarily need a vacation from, too,
I
you know?
love that.
Yeah, man, 100%. Oh, so good. All right, well, let's bring some of these gentlemen in. We got another handsome gentleman in here, and Mr. Sean Corcoran. Let's see, are you? I think he was also in the gym. So, Sean, are you good? Oh, please take all the young men questions before me, but if there's time left, I have something you may be asking it right now. All right, Sean, we'll have you come back in. We'll get Malachi first then.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks, Sean. Malachi, come on in, sir.
All right. Thank you for coming on for your time, sir. I just had a quick general question. When I look at, other kids and everywhere I go, I tend to see, I feel like a lot of parents choose less. Um, like they're real quick to help when there's problems, and they don't like they're like even just recently. So I do 4-H, and I'm on board, and we're in charge of like helping with judging and stuff. And I see there were parents that would go with their kid to the judge at the table when you're supposed to go with yourself. So do you find that the majority of our child psychologists or people in that area tend to favor helping the kid, or like, so is your work more breakthrough
Mm,
or special, or like what's the
mm,
spectrum there?
mm,
So I work a lot with parents, and one of the main things that we do is reducing what we call parental accommodations. And what you're describing is a good example of one. So a parental accommodation is an involvement that is unnecessary and inappropriate for the developmental level of the child. So needing to help a child have a conversation with an adult is a great example of parental accommodation. Most therapy with little kids, probably until about age 12, is just ineffective. And so they're just not old enough to remember even what you talked about on a Monday, and when they're dysregulated on a Friday, do that. And so a lot of the work that has been shown actually to be effective is parent-based work. And that's a good example of parent-based work that is meant to get a parent out of a kid's hair, because they're trying to help. It's the best of intentions, but they're actually harming kids by stepping in every time. And so, it tends to be pretty short work, because once we do that, we see results. The type of therapy I do does not last for years. It's a terrible business model. I need new clients all the time, but it's effective. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but getting parents to accommodate less is a lot of what we do.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
That's awesome. Yeah, maybe not the best business model, but the world seems to be doing a really good job of creating scenarios. Unfortunately, they're gonna, it's gonna keep you full for quite a while. When Malachi is asking that, I started thinking just with peers in general, peer to peer. Do you have peers who in your work are coming like, oh no, doctor, you gotta, I don't like this. Like you get pushback internally where it's like, oh, what's your quackery and like you get some of that too. And where does that, without obviously we don't need to name names, but what are what are their whys behind that? No, this isn't the way to go, because what we really need is like, what are those common arguments that you hear, if any?
Yeah. I don't really get a lot of pushback about independence therapy. It has seemed to excite a lot of people.
Good.
But I am aware that the contingencies in my field are all wrong. And the longer you see a client, the better for you financially. And so anything that is short and simple, I know I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers or it's not going to be
Mhm.
profitable for people. But I haven't had anybody like openly attack me. They certainly do for other views I have, but not really for
For
my
that.
work. So like the example of like climate anxiety,
Sure.
I have certainly had a lot of pushback about stuff like that. That tends to have a more political bent.
Unfortunately, yeah, kind of a political undertone. Do you get, I mean, there's so many things even from a, and I've used this example quite a bit because we have, so one of the campuses that I opened in California, Jo Jorgensen, when she was running for president, she came and did her Northern California speech at our campus. And so, and I introduced her from the stage. She came out and did her talk. Now, I also use that campus for a number of things. I wanted it to be a hub for education, not just for the kids during the day, but for men, women, children, and the whole community. And it was operating in the evenings and on the weekends. And we had Democratic groups, we had Republican groups, we had Libertarian groups, we had the groups that were saying we want to split California in half and do a new California. They all had meeting spaces at our campus. I really just wanted it to be a hub for conversation, for civil discourse, for growth, for learning, for independence. Um, but at that Jo Jorgensen, thing, I had people come up to me and go, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know you were a libertarian. That's amazing." And then I had other people at the same event going, "Why are you hosting her? I see the way that the kids have a voice at your school. You're a Democrat, so like, what's going?" And then some that are like, "You're bearded and you're wearing a suit, and I know you love business, and I think you're carrying a gun right now. You're a Republican. What's going?" Right? So like, we're in this culture of a politicization of everything. Have you had to face that at all, where it's like, oh? Because what are the undertones on that? Because with everything we're doing from an education standpoint too, people are like, "Oh, look at you, Republicans trying to change everything." I'm like, it's automatically politicized.
Yes.
What do you see
Yes.
with that with your work?
So this is my eighth job. I've co-created something called the Open Therapy Institute, and it
Okay.
is basically a place where if you want a therapist who has committed to not politicizing therapy,
Mm.
we have a list of referrals for free, and we will give out those names to people because my field has therapy has gone from a place where you would never know the political orientation of your therapist to now organizations like the American Psychological Association saying it is unethical to not institute societal change through things like anti-racism in your therapy, and that you have to do that. And I think it is destroying my field. And we need to go back to a place where the therapy is about what the goals of the client are and have nothing to do with the goals of the therapist, in particular, their political goals. So yes, check out the Open Therapy Institute. I'm actively working on this problem, and it is a big problem.
Wow, very very cool. I appreciate that. I appreciate that perspective greatly. Especially from an educator standpoint, which again, that's a whole nother political bag right there in education. I very much appreciate that. Logan.
All right, you got me?
Yes, sir. We've got you.
Mr. Ortiz, I appreciate your time today. Thank you
You're
very
right.
much. I'm a father of two younger girls, 14, and actually, I shouldn't say young. My oldest just turned 18. Um, you talked earlier about sort of less parenting, and I feel like my wife and I have done a good job at that. But there's a challenge for us, and it's just screen time. Screen time has just become like this thing is tough. We have some boundaries, no phones at the table at dinner time. But if we weren't home, the two girls would be in their bedrooms just on their screen. So just trying to figure out a way to encourage them, to be more interactive and social in person. We had a conversation about this the other night. They keep telling me, "Oh, well, that's how we socialize these days." You just don't understand, Dad. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, so my thoughts might surprise you because um, they have sort of pieces from both sides coming up, and in part what your daughters are saying is absolutely true. This is how kids socialize. It's interesting to look back through history at parental reactions to technological innovations. And if you look at what's in the newspapers today, it was the same with video games when I was a kid. It was the same in the 40s when television became more widespread. And it was even the same when radio became more widespread. There are articles in 1875 saying all kids are doing these days is sitting around the radio. They're not outside anymore. So that's important to realize, that when you see the same kind of reaction and then catastrophe doesn't happen, that should give you a little pause that maybe we're in the same loop. Having said that, John Haidt and others, I think, have convincingly shown, and it's hard because we can't do randomized controlled trials where we make some kids go on Facebook and some kids, I mean, we can, but there's lots of issues there. So this is all correlational. And I think he's done a good job to show that right around the time that social media exploded is when we saw generally around that time mental health outcomes go south. And so that tells us a couple of important things. And one is that we can't treat all technology the same. And it is pretty clear that certain types of social media are worse for kids than other things. So like video games, for example, and in particular social video games, where it's the people you know are playing the same video game. I haven't seen a shred of evidence that that's bad for kids, even though parents, it drives them crazy to see kids doing that for hours. Social media for young girls tends to be the worst combination of things. But even that group, it's not bad for all young girls. And so we tend to see that girls who are lonelier or have poor social skills tend to do even worse in that group. So it's hard to give a general assessment of phones or social media. So that's one thing I'll say. At the other end, there are some smart things and fairly easy things that we can do to create a little pressure to socialize in real time. And so things like what you do, like a hard and fast rule, we don't have phones at dinner, is a good example. There are some pretty easy technological solutions. So I have a router in my home. It's the Amazon one. It's called Eero, and super easy on your app to either just shut off a person's devices so it doesn't affect the Wi-Fi for anybody else, or to just set up a couple of times during the day when devices don't work. And I like the idea, and I started this with my son, and the easiest way to start this is I said, from 3 to 5 in the morning, your phone's not going to work. And he's like, oh, I'm sleeping, I don't care. So there was no battle there. And then over time, I started increasing it, or including other family members, or including the whole family. And so on weekends, we'll have a couple of hours where people's phones just don't work. And that creates boredom, and boredom is a wonderful motivator for kids. And this is one big advantage we have over kids, is our frontal cortex is more developed. And so boredom is not as terrible to people our age as it is. It's like torture, to a 13-year-old. And so you actually don't need a ton of time that is phone free for them to start doing some things during that time. So I would approach it slowly, tentatively, with no catastrophic worries that screens are horrendous for kids, but with some smart steps to force kids without a fight to have to do some other things.
Really good. What do you think, Levin?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your insight.
You got it.
That's good. And I love that. I love the nuance on that too, because, we've had conversations on a number of these things with some of the young men that are here too. And I've had young men over the years that have reached out and go, man, video games, like I actually don't do anything else anymore. Okay, well then that's a different story. That is there's we got to get down to the root of the issue there. What do we need to do instead? How do we reprioritize? How do we retrain? Like that's a different thing. But it's been very interesting, and some of the talks I've had with Peter too on just look, man, it's not inherently, it in and of itself does not need to be villainized, the way it often is. I think
What you just said is a super important question. Is it replacing face-to-face contact?
right,
Or,
right,
or just more generally, what is it replacing?
right.
And that tells us a lot about whether we need to do anything about it. Many times we actually don't
That's
need to
right.
do anything about it.
That's right. And it's when there becomes this inability or perceived inability to do something else because it has replaced. And then you've got because we also hear the cliches, but I also know that the cliches can tend to be true too and even building campuses. I worked with organizations around the world and some of the bigger organizations, and I would hear from hiring managers, they're going, hey, we've got young people who are struggling more with eye contact. They are struggling more with anxiety. They don't understand how to communicate. And I've had this as an employer. They had mom or dad come to the interview with them or call after and go, why did they not get the job? And it's like, well, they're 24. They could have called themselves, right? Like that does really happen.
We have people show up for doctoral study interviews with their parents.
I,
College graduates trying to get into graduate school.
I wish I could say that's unbelievable, but I so believe it. I so believe it. Sean, are you ready, sir? Can we get you in, or should I go? You good? Yeah,
Yes, I am.
Beautiful.
Dr. Ortiz, thank you so much for coming on. This has been something that was really interesting. I was hoping that it would be whenever I saw that you were coming on, and has been. Matt did ask my initial question, which is about ages. In particular, I have a 5-year-old, he'll be 6 in a couple weeks. That I have 5 kids, but he is challenging, more challenging. We have no problem with independence here. We would probably have a one of those NCIS or whatever shows made about how horrible we are as parents, letting our kids just do whatever they need to do to figure out life. But outside of that, for someone of that age, outside of basic independence, like I did hear the example of the sweater, which is something we've experienced here with both of our 5-year-olds and our 4-year-old. Do you have any thoughts on that? And again, this is outside of me like calling you, setting up an appointment, spending 14 hours explaining everything that we're going through, and then getting real.
So you just mean on the challenging nature of a 5-year-old in general?
Yes, things that parents might be able to do other than just, the sweater thing I would call basic independence,
Sure.
just from our standpoint. Would be
Can
my
you give me
question.
an example of something frustrating you as a parent? Because it's hard to answer that question generally. And if
Okay.
you don't want to get specific, totally get it.
No, I don't mind getting specific. I just don't want to take up all the time doing that. So I was actually about to jump on another call. I think probably the best thing to do would be for me to reach out to you
Sure.
and set up a time when we can actually talk about it and you can get paid for your services like you should. So I'll do that, and I'll let the other gentleman on the call use the time for more general questions.
Thanks.
I do appreciate you coming on.
That's fair. And Sean, just to be clear, Zizi did say that you do shoot at your children. From what right when she was here at the farm, she was making reference to you shooting at your children, which sounds to me like an ample amount of danger, sir. So we got clarification for everybody. We got clarification afterwards, but that did come out.
I think she said that Sophia almost got shot. I don't think she said I was shooting at her.
That's right. That's right.
She chose to walk in front of the field of the target of an airsoft gun.
There you go. Well, I just choose
just so nobody thinks I'm using live rounds around my 4-year-old outside.
I just choose to remember it a different way, and I may tell the story. That's fine.
I can accept that.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Too funny. Mr. Nelson.
Hello. I was just standing in line, so I'm going to take the chance I don't ask repeat question. I was having a hard
course.
time listening. My question is, in this the nature of independence that you're talking about, with how much issues do you have with the young folks going hog wild, exploring and getting into substances like vaping, alcohol, pot, stuff like that? How much of an issue does that tend to be?
We haven't seen that yet. We've only recently started studying independence therapy, so we don't have long-term outcomes, but nothing would suggest to me that that's a major concern. And in fact, if we see anxiety dropping from independence therapy, the need for substances should drop as well. So I would expect that actually would make kids less likely to use substances. I sometimes get questions about whether independence therapy is appropriate for all kids. And there is one category of kids where there's clear evidence that it's not. And these are kids who are delinquents. So having less parental oversight, they tend to do more delinquent stuff. And they also tend to get together with other kids who are delinquents. And we get what has been termed delinquency training, where they each kind of teach each other their ways and their tricks. So I would be a little concerned about allowing even more independence for kids who are getting into vandalism and drug use and aggression. The other group is kids on the spectrum. Not that they should not be independent, and there are many reasons that they should be, but we probably have to change the treatment a little bit so we go slower, because they tend to have less of an awareness of danger. The same is also true for kids who have ADHD. Their accident rates are, even the rates of accidental death are about 50% higher than kids who don't have ADHD. So they would be happy to be independent, but they often won't look to see if they're walking down the street with their back to traffic, or other things that are just unnecessarily dangerous. But we have not seen negative side effects. In fact, we've seen positive side effects of things that we didn't even initially consider, like the quality of the parent-child relationship has gone up with less contact between the two. So that's kind of interesting.
That's really good. Does that make sense, Tim?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, really good. Really good. Maddie D, gentlemen, to make sure we're honoring time too, we got Mr. Davis and then Mr. Toland. And that'll probably, and then we'll go into wrapping and making sure we know how we can support and follow Doc C over here too. Maddie D.
Dr. Ortiz, thanks for taking some time out with us today.
Sure.
So I had a question, and then I'll hang up and listen to your response. I was just curious to see if you've come across any research in terms of anxiety, ADHD being linked with the standard American diet and how our kids are eating and how that's linking up to this rise in anxiety.
Yeah. There's very little research supporting a dietary connection with either ADHD or anxiety, despite the fact that it feels like there should be. And a lot of people feel fairly certain. This again is a hard thing to study because you can't exactly randomize kids to a high sugar diet over 2 years. But there is just not the level of evidence that would suggest that we focus our energies on diet as one of the top things that we work on. There's lots of other good reasons why kids shouldn't be on high sugar diets, but in terms of ADHD, which tends to be mostly genetic brain dysfunction, or anxiety, which tends to be explained by other things, including genetics and parenting, it just wouldn't be at the top of the things that I would aim at. That's my answer.
Very cool. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Mr. Toland.
Good morning.
Sir.
So I was curious, in the piece you were talking about around doing dangerous things. So I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I've seen in other avenues as I've tried to shift my parenting around, one of the biggest things you can do is just let them observe, and they learn from the behaviors that you show, whether you exercise regularly, how you eat, those kinds of things.
Yes.
So my first question is doing these kinds of dangerous things. So if I take him with me when I go to do jujitsu and him observing that, or me doing quote unquote dangerous activities, my kids being observant or in the vicinity of that, is that something like behaviors in general that will transfer to them?
Yes, I once heard Jordan Peterson succinctly sum up, I think, what you're asking, and he said something like, doing dangerous things carefully is the sweet spot. And so I think that also applies to observing someone else do dangerous things carefully. So as long as that's what's happening, and it sounds like it is, and maybe afterward you even have a discussion that isn't lectury, but is more curious. You know, what did you notice when I was doing this? Oh, I noticed that you were holding this in a particular way. That's right, because that's how we make sure that we maintain whatever it is. I think that maybe inherent in the question is this fear that if kids see us do things that are dangerous, they will just start doing those things. And there's some truth to that. I mean, this is what we call social learning in my field. And the original study on this was they would bring in kids to the lab, and there was one of these like inflatable clown, they called it a Bobo doll. And the adult would just start punching it and then leave the room. And then they would see what the kid would do. And the kid would start punching the Bobo doll. And so that was one of the first studies that showed that kids imitate adults. But we can use that to our benefit if we're imitating doing dangerous things carefully. So I would encourage you to do lots of that stuff, as long as there's there's probably some things, that are just developmentally completely inappropriate for a kid to see. But as long as we're being reasonable, like I said at the beginning here, what you're doing is probably just fine.
And then my second question is around, as I think about a practical application, obviously going to a playground is something that we do pretty regularly. And I have tried to kind of step back as he's learning how to climb monkey bars and those kinds of things. Can you kind of sketch that out a little bit of how is standing, what that kind of a scenario might look like, where you could see potentially there might be a fall that could happen there, and what is the distance that is most appropriate when you have kids of that age that are learning how to move their body and those kinds of things and instruction, but not being a helicopter?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I have two answers to it. One is, I actually had a client a couple of weeks ago. It was a dad, and his homework was to let his kid run into a monkey bar, because he was saying, all I do when I take my kid to the park is I'm chasing her around for 2 hours. I'm exhausted. This is not how I want to be spending my time. And there was one like low-hanging metal piece, and he says, she never looks, and I always have to rush and put my hand over her head. And so again, this might sound like strange advice coming from a child psychologist. I said, what would happen if she ran into it? Do you think she'd get a concussion or anything serious? No, just at most maybe a little bump in the head. And so that was the homework. And she bumped her head. It was even less than he thought, and she cried a little bit. And then the next time and every time after that, she ducked. And that was a perfect example, right? There are these playgrounds. We have one here in New York on Governor's Island called the Yard, and I send a lot of my patients there, and it's filled with junk, and no parents are allowed. And I have these amazing photos of like a line of nervous parents around the yard. Actually, there's two groups of parents. There are parents who have been there, and they're across the road at the wine bar, and the new parents are all nervously looking over the fence, and the kids inside are having the greatest time of their lives. And there are hammers and nails and saws. There's this one kid who had a 2x4 on his lap, and he's sawing it. And his mother's like, you're going to cut your leg off. And he said, I know where to stop. I'm not going to cut my leg off. He didn't cut his leg off. And so if you have one of those in your area, I highly suggest going. But your question was about like the proper distance.
Huh.
And I think it's sort of like inversely related to how irreparable the harm would be. So if the child's near a, like a huge drop off, I'd be really close. But if it's something like a bump in the head, I would be far from that. And I would, again, would not consider it a failure of parenting if my kid bumps their head. If I were there, I'd give you a high five for letting that happen, because it's not easy to watch that happen. But that dad did his daughter a huge favor by allowing. I don't know if that answers your question.
That was so good.
No, it absolutely does. And thank you for your work and being outside of the box and not following things that have happened prior. We need more people like you, and I'm excited to know that there's somebody in the world like you. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, sir.
No, agreed. Very much so. That Bobo study that you're talking, was there a proclivity difference for young men, young women?
Yeah, boys were much more likely to punch the thing 100 times.
I would think. Yeah, absolutely. And is there on the anxiety side, and I'm sorry for that question, kind of on the back end, but on the anxiety side, are you seeing a big difference between young men, young ladies, or is it based upon things like age, social media? I mean, I'm sure there's a number of variables, but is there an inherent like, oh, it's
Yes.
clearly affecting one more than the other?
So we grouped disorders for kids into two baskets, what we call internalizing disorders. These are things that are experienced inside, anxiety and depression, and externalizing disorders that affect those around us, like aggression and conduct problems. And it is the oldest finding in my field that girls and women have higher levels of internalizing disorders and men have higher levels of externalizing disorders. And you see this in little kids.
Makes sense.
It's almost as if the two sexes are a little different.
It's almost as if they're different. Yeah, I understand. Yes, sir. Oh man, so good. So good. Okay, so before we get to the final two questions are going to be what can we help send people to, whether it's a website, whether it's books, whether it's all the above. We want to do that, and we want to make sure us as an organization, you are doing such important work, and it ties in so much with what we are doing from a parenting side, from an education side. The final questions will be, where do people go to find your work and how do we support you? But right before that, if you don't mind, who do you pay attention to? Who do you like? Like, I want to dive into anything that you've got going on. I think it's fascinating. Who are you looking at and you're like, ooh, I'm really liking their work? Is there anybody in particular?
That's such a good question. It tends to be people actually outside of my field. I don't have a very high opinion of most psychologists.
Understood.
So if you're familiar with Abigail Schreier, she wrote a book called Bad Therapy. And aside from her talking about me, which is a nice ego boost in there, the book itself, I think, is so important because it brings to light these important questions that psychologists never ask each other. Like, is there any danger in being in therapy? Is there the possibility of people getting worse? And there is. This is also a very old finding. Between 5 and 20% of people who enter therapy get worse. And we never talk about this in my field because it's quite an inconvenient truth.
Yes, sir.
And so it takes someone like Abigail outside the field, an investigative journalist, to bring up these very important questions. So I love her work.
Very good. No, that's awesome, man. Great answer. Okay, so where do we go to find you? Where do we send everybody? And how do we, as an organization, help you in any way? How do we support you?
Follow me on Twitter. And my website is drcamiloortiz.com. Doctor is just DR, not the whole word. There's a great New York Times article that describes independence therapy that I wrote with Lenore in September. So that's a good place to hear more about independence therapy. And then there's a link to it, to her organization, Let Grow, for parents, for teachers, and for mental health providers that will show you how you can use independence in your own work.
So good. Doc, we are very much aligned, very much on your team. I echo the sentiment that was shared earlier. I'm grateful for you, for your work, for your voice on this. I want to see that message continue to go far and wide. So consider us very much on your team, and
Thank
any
you
other
so much.
opportunities that we have to support you, please say the word. I'll
Yeah,
take you guys
sure.
through a debrief, but really, really grateful for today.
Thank you again. It was so much fun.